Okay, I just wanted to do a quick introduction to the video that's about to follow about Hydrobuddy and and how to use the program. I'm going to stitch the video from an Israeli scientist, Dr. Nesri Bernstein, after the Hydrobuddy video, and it'll help explain some of the ppm numbers and where they come from and why they make sense to the plant. I'll also insert a little clip at the end of the Hydrobuddy video I'll put some of the common commercial fertilizers and their ppms on the screen, just so you can kind of see what a few of them look like Jack's 321, Athena, Crop Salt, and you can kind of just see what those fertilizers use for both their grow and bloom for ppm, and it'll give you kind of an idea of some numbers that you can try and target with the fertilizers that you use. So stay tuned for the next part of Hydrobuddy, and then obviously the commercial fertilizers. I'll put some screenshots up on the film, or on the video rather, and then after that it'll link right to the ppm and the lady from Israel and her studies on ppm for each element. So long video, lots of stuff to digest, and I hope it's very helpful for you to end up learning what ppms are and how to tailor those for your own custom hydroponic schedule. So enjoy. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to do a small tutorial on a program called Hydrobuddy. It's used for calculating nutrients in hydroponic growing. It's a fantastic program. It's an open source program, and it's free for anyone to use for Mac and PC. It works best on computers. It doesn't work well with cell phones. I've never got the application to work, and I've never seen anyone that has. But that doesn't mean it doesn't. It just works best for laptops, in my opinion. Okay, I'm going to click on the internet here and open up the search result for Hydrobuddy. If you're looking for the program, type it into Google, and you'll see the very first link here, Science in Hydroponics. And if you click that, it says Hydrobuddy version 1.100, and it talks about the program and its availability online. If you scroll right down to the bottom, you'll see that there's links here to get Hydrobuddy and the setup files for each type of system you might have, whether it be Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. So just click on, I use Windows, so just click the link, it'll download and install the program. And that should hopefully help you get a hold of the program. Okay, so we'll go back, and I've already installed the program. I have it pinned down here at the bottom of my page. And so I guess the question before we open the program is, why should you use Hydrobuddy? And Hydrobuddy is a really interesting program, because if you're feeding your plants nutrients, you walk into your local hydroponic store and you pick a bunch of nutrients, and they're God's great gift to growing, whether it's no matter what brand it is, and you're forced to follow the feed charts, and you're kind of blindly following what the company is telling you to feed the plants because they've done all the research, and if you buy their 15 bottles of nutrients, you'll have the best growth ever. Well, what Hydrobuddy does is it takes it down to the raw elements that plants need in order to thrive. And it comes down to the macro nutrients and then the micronutrients. And so the 5 big macronutrients are obviously nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And then we start to get into the micronutrients, sulfur, boron, copper, zinc, molybdenum. There's about 13 of them or so. And we'll go through them when we open the Hydrobuddy program. But if we know essentially how much of a certain element to feed a plant at a certain life stage, we can then start to use any fertilizers to try and use the guaranteed analysis on the bag to tailor in the dosages per milliliter or per gram so that we reach the desired numbers of parts per million for each one of those elements inside of our hydroponic solution. And so I know what I just said there might sound a little cloudy. I promise you it'll probably start to make more sense as we look at this a little bit more. And we'll talk about where we get these numbers from, because at first you're just going to say, well, this guy's just plugging in these numbers. Where does he get these numbers from? And we'll explain that a little bit further. And I'll link to a few videos that help explain some of that. So without further ado, let's launch the program. So this is Hydrobuddy, and when you launch it, you're going to get this welcome screen. And this is just introducing you to the program. It's kind of a landing page, but really the meat and the potatoes of where we want to work is here on the main page. And when we go to the main page, we have a whole bunch of information that can look a little bit overwhelming, but we'll break it down in sections. So here on the left-hand side where my cursor is running up and down, this is going to be our target ppms for each element that we're trying to achieve inside of our hydroponic solution. And so these numbers are here because I've saved certain recipes within Hydrobuddy here, and I'll teach you how to do that in a minute. We're going to do that in the next moment. And then I can recall them, and it'll put these numbers back here for me. So remember that when we're on this page, these are the targets. These are the numbers that we plug in, and Hydrobuddy will try and achieve with the nutrients that we provide to it. Over here is the formulations. This is where you can save your formulations, and then you can recall them. So if you plug it in and you like the formula, you can hit here, add the formula to the database, and you can also delete formulas from the database. And you can recall those numbers by clicking. Let's just say we click this one. You'll see all the numbers change. And you can use different recipes, whether it's for vegetation, for early flower, late flower, end of flower, whatever you'd like. Or whether it's even peppers or tomatoes or any other item that you might be growing. So this is our formulation area. Down here we have volume. So this is essentially how much are we mixing up. Are we mixing up 2 liters, 4 liters? Are we mixing in gallons? So this will help us determine how many milliliters and how many grams of the fertilizers that we're using that we need to add to this amount of water that we put in here to achieve these numbers. So it's really critical that we have this correctly. This is for making concentrated A and B solutions. We're not going to touch on that in this tutorial. And then up here we have substance selection we're about to get into, and we also have set water quality parameters. We'll talk about how you can set the elements that you might have from a water analysis in your area so that Hydrobuddy takes it into consideration when trying to calculate these numbers. If your water has calcium in it and you're trying to achieve 154, 155 parts per million of calcium and your water has 30, it will deduct that and add it and use the nutrient solution at a lesser amount in order to achieve the target number. So you can go into set water quality parameters and read this right off your report. If you have it, plug it in, label it. This is RO, but you could put home water or well water or tap water or 50/50 RO and tap water. And you can, of course, save this to the database. Okay, so let's get into how we add substances. And when we say substances, we're talking about fertilizers. So this is the substance selection button, and I'm going to click it, and it's going to open a new window. And I'll put the window over here for now, and you're going to see a whole bunch of items listed here. And these are the items that I've added to the database. I've already done the process that I'm about to show, and you're not going to have any of these inside of your database. You might just have a few raw elements towards the end. Perhaps it's this kind of stuff: potassium carbonate, chloride, citrate, the sodium stuff, and magnesium sulfate, those kind of types of things. So let's, what I did here was we're going to show you how to add products. I'm going to clear all of the stuff that I normally use over here. We're going to say all. Okay, we're empty, we're clear, we're good to go. Okay, so I'm going to, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to use labels that I got off the internet for General Hydroponics 3-part Flora series. And I purposely am choosing that because it's readily available to everyone. General Hydroponics is a huge company, and it's something that's pretty easily accessible, and I can find a lot of information on a label store. So I did the very easy task of just going on the internet, excuse me, and downloading some labels for some products from General Hydroponics so that we can add it in, and I can show you how to add it into the database. So I'm going to open up the internet here, and the first product that we have here is General Hydroponics Cali Magic. So this is a cow mag, and over here is what we're really interested in, and this is the guaranteed analysis. This label represents the label that would be on your bottle. So if you have the bottle in front of you, always take the numbers from the bottle that's in front of you and never off a label from the internet. I can tell you from working with people in different countries that these recipes change from country to country based upon the laws, of what's allowed in terms of substances to make those fertilizers. So the brand name might be the same, but the ratios and numbers might be a little bit different. So nonetheless, this is Kali Magic. This is what we want to add into our Hydrobuddy. It's going to be our first one. And in the middle here, we have a little button that says Add New. So we're going to click that. And right away, a little window pops up. I'm going to drag it over here for now. And I'll move this up. Sorry, while I just organize my life here. Okay, so it's a little window here, and that's what we're going to use to add this stuff into Hydrobuddy. Okay, so it's disappearing. It's kind of kicking my label out. So I'll try my best to do it. So what we're looking at here is total amounts of nitrogen. And the very first thing it says is 1%. So you'll see 1% nitrate nitrogen. And when we're over here adding that in, there's two types of nitrogen. The top one, NO3, is a nitrate version of nitrogen. And since Kali Magic's label said it only had 1% nitrate nitrogen, we'll put 1. This is an ammonium type of nitrogen, and it's not recommended that we pick fertilizers with an ammonium type of nitrogen, as it can have major consequences to pH in hydroponic systems. And it also needs organic material to break it down and make it available to the root system. So it can have negative impacts in hydroponics, affecting plant growth, and can take a lot of energy from the plant. So let's stick with fertilizers for hydroponics that require higher amounts of nitrate forms of nitrogen. If you have some ammonium nitrogen in the product that you've chosen, don't be too concerned if it's 5 or 10%. But if you're going to the Walmart and you're picking some off-the-shelf fertilizer that you're trying to use in your hydroponic system and it's meant for the garden, it's probably not a good idea. Okay, so I'll carry on. Let's go back to the label, and it says here calcium. Calcium is 5%. So we just go to CA on the Hydrobuddy and we put in 5% for calcium. It's going to say magnesium at 1.5% of water-soluble magnesium. So we're going to select the magnesium, 1.5. And lastly is going to be iron at 0.1. So we're going to go here to iron at 0.1. Whoops, 0.1. Okay, and before I hit add to database, I'm just going to show you something that's a common error and can really get people hung up with the program. Let's say I meant to add sulfur, but I didn't, and I left this cell blank without a 0. And then I say, okay, I'm all done. I've entered everything off my label. I'm going to add to database. What happens is we get an error, and it says it's an invalid float. Please ignore the data corruption and press and kill the program. And you say, okay. And you kind of get stuck in this loop. You say, what's happening? And then there's another error, and you're not really sure what's happening. It's all because you've left the cell blank. When we put a 0 in, you'll see it'll say add to database. All of a sudden, we had great success, and we've added it to the database. Okay, so one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to label that product. And so I'm going to go through my real-time errors here with you folks. So let's see if I can find it. Okay, we're going to do this again just because it'll be a little bit quicker than me doing it again. And we'll go through these items. So it had 1% of a nitrogen. It had 1.5% of a magnesium. It had 5% of calcium, and it had 0.1% iron. And what I forgot to do last time, which is why I had to input these again, is I needed to name this product. And so for this, the purpose of this video, I'm going to start it with A, just so it's at the top of our list. And I'm going to put general. Let's just put GH for General Hydroponics, Kali Magic Tutorial. And I'm just writing this so that later I can find these and delete them easier. You can put the formula here, and what they mean by the formula is just this, 1-0-0. So if you want to keep track of that and that's important to you, you can do that, 1-0-0. Okay, and here it says add substance in ml to input a weight per volume. And then it says this is weight per weight. So what this means is if you're using a liquid, which Kali Magic is, you want to click this because On the output page, it's going to convert that to milliliters instead of grams. And once we're all done, we've labeled the product, we've put in the formula, we've ensured it's a liquid. If it's not a liquid, then we don't click this box if it's a dry salt. And then we just hit add to database. And now at the top, you can see here, A, General Hydroponics Cali Magic. Okay, so we're going to go to another label, and we'll do that for Flora Bloom. And it might be a little bit painful for you folks as I input these, but I think it's important, and practice makes perfect. So it's going to help somebody out there, I know. Okay, so here is the Flora Bloom. We're going to need this in our 3-part series. So this one is a 054, so we're going to add it here. We're going to start, very first thing we're going to do is label it. So we're going to put an A, so it's at the top, and then we'll put GH. And I forgot which one we're doing here. Looks like Flora Bloom. Okay. So we'll put in Flora Bloom. And the formula for this one is a 054. I'll put this over here. I might be able to even make it a little easier. So this is going to be 0-5-4. Okay, it's going to be a liquid. We know that. And it says here, available phosphate. See here it says P2O2, I believe it says. And you'll notice here this says P. And it says 5% at P2O2. So we want to make sure that we select P2O5 rather. And this one had 5%. And so we're just going to literally put in 5%. This is about an elemental weight for phosphorus. So as long as you follow what it says, you don't have to worry about anything. As for the potassium, you want to make sure you select K2O at 4%. So again, we're going to go here, select K2O, and we're going to put in 4%. And what's next on the list? Magnesium at 1.5 and sulfur at 1. So we're going to go to magnesium at 1.5 and sulfur at 1. And we are good to go. We've labeled it. We've put in, oops, I almost had it wrong there. We've put in the formula. We've made sure we've selected this for liquid, and we've put in all of the nutrients on this product. So now it's a matter of add to database. And it says here, P will be converted to the P percentage for P2O5. So it's just telling you that it's doing that elemental change for you, and it'll do the same for K. And then after we're done, we can see here up the top, AGH Flora Bloom. So we have another one added to the mix. Now we'll move on to Flora Grow. And for Flora Grow, let's see if I can, whoops. Just give me a sec here. Sorry, folks, you'll have to put up with the real-time errors here as I make these videos. And I think it's important we keep them because these are the real struggles that I think people will get to. So we're going to put our input name again. So it's AGH Flora Grow. And our input formula for this one is a 216. So we're going to select 2-1-6. We're going to select this little box as we're dealing with a liquid again. And then it's 2% nitrogen. But if you see here, it'll say 0.25% is ammonomical nitrogen and 1.75 is nitrate nitrogen. So let's break it up when we input this into our system. So the nitrate, it said it was 1.75, and for the other form, it was 0.25. Okay, so you can tell that your label's going to give you all of the information to input here. And it says available phosphate, which was P2O5, is 1%. So we got to make sure that we collect the right spot. And that was 1%. Okay. And soluble potash, which is K2O at 6%. So we're going to select K2O, and we're going to put in 6%. All right, you can see we're moving pretty good through here. And then it's 0.5% magnesium. So we're going to go to magnesium, 0.5% magnesium. So again, we're going to double check. We have labeled it A, the Flora Grow. It's a 216 formula. We've selected this for liquid, and we've inputted all of the items from the label. We're going to select add to database, and of course, at the top it says A, General Hydroponics Flora Grow. Okay, It says the P will be converted. It says K will be converted. We talked about that. Fantastic. And we're going to add another label. And it's going to be our last one in the series. So this is the Flora Micro. And these are all of your micronutrients inside the General Hydroponics 3-part Flora line. Okay, so let's label this as we did last time. So we're going to put in A just to put it at the top of our list, General Hydroponics Flora Micro. And we're going to check out our formula here. It's a 501. So let's put in our formula, 5-01. We're going to click this little icon button to make sure that it's going to give us output in milliliters. And then we're just going to input. So here we have 3% ammonium nitrogen. I'm not saying that right, sorry. And 4.7 nitrate. So we're going to put 4.7% and 0.3%, I believe it said. Let's just double check that. Yep, that looks good. So the soluble potash, K2O, is 1%. So we're going to go down here and put in 1%. Okay, calcium is going to be 5%. So we're going to go down here and put in 5%. And boron is going to be 0.002 or 0.01. So we're going to put boron at 0.01. We're going to do cobalt at decimal 3 zeros and a 5. So where do we see cobalt again? SI cobalt, where are you? Well, I'm not seeing cobalt listed here in Hydrobuddy unless it's here. No. Okay, so we're just going to move past the cobalt. In terms of copper, it's 0.01, so 0.01. And we have iron at 0.1, iron at 0.1, and manganese is 0.05, and molybdenum is 0.0008, 0.0008, and zinc is 0.015, so zinc is 0.015. Okay, it looks like we've added everything so far off the label. There's some things, obviously, that aren't on here. That's fine. I think this is chlorine and some other items here. But for the most part, it looks like it's all there. So, again, last check. We've labeled the product. We've put in the formula. We've added this to ensure that it's a liquid. We've entered everything off of our label, and now we add to database. And, of course, it gives us the warning that it's converting K and P. Actually, there was no P, so it just gave us the K warning. And then here are our 4 products that we just entered. So the great news is we can select them because now we're going to build our own recipe based upon the numbers. And so we need to add these into the substance used for calculations. And what that is doing, it's telling Hydrobuddy, hey, these are the ingredients that we want to use to achieve our set of numbers over here for our current grow. So I'm going to use my own set of numbers that I use typically for seedlings days 0 to 14. And these are, we're going to change this a bit here, 30. And we're going to change, yeah, that looks good. Okay, I don't really enter in, whenever I'm entering numbers for my formulas, I'm always focused on the big macronutrients. So it's these 5 here, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, the magnesium, the calcium, and sulfur to some degree. I really like to look at because especially in flower, sulfur can help with terpene production. The rest of the micronutrients, I really leave that to the manufacturers, especially in their base nutrient bundles, to try and achieve the numbers that we require. So I just leave them blank for now. But that being said, I'll tell you a little bit about where I get these numbers. So for me, these numbers are ones that I found have worked for me. And the question I'm sure it's going to be asked is, well, where did you get these numbers from? And, well, there's a video that I'm going to link in the Hydrobuddy playlist here, and it's going to be from an Israeli scientist. Her name is Nesrit Bernstein, I believe, and she's been doing cannabis research for a very long time. And she goes over in the video the different amounts of each nutrient that they have studied and fed the plant and seen the outcomes of each one of those from. So, you know, she starts at 30 ppm of nitrogen, and they see the result. and then they do 100 ppm, 150 ppm, 200 ppm, and 250 ppm of nitrogen, and they show pictures of what the plant looks like and what is required as deficient, what is adequate, and obviously what is excess or can become toxic. And so she discusses this for nitrogen, she discusses it for phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, but you can easily find, with searching, what are some ppm numbers for each of these elements, and then you need to test them in your grow and see how it works. Now, there's things that are going to affect the numbers that you have, and one a good example is I like to grow in cocoa, and the cocoa has something called a cation exchange, and it's high in potassium and high in salts, and so when they buffer cocoa, they usually rinse it with a calcium and magnesium solution, and what that does is it allows the cocoa to release the excess potassium that it's holding on to in the media, and it literally grabs and steals cocoa and magnesium. And so cocoa tends to want to steal magnesium and calcium out of your nutrient solution. So sometimes you might find you need to run a little bit higher calcium and magnesium solutions inside of your hydroponic if you're growing in cocoa, just to counteract that cation exchange. So these are the numbers that I've selected. It's 125 ppm of nitrate nitrogen. It's a very low amount of ammonical nitrogen. It's 30 ppm of phosphorus, and K is 132 ppm. Magnesium, let's say I actually like to be up around 60, and calcium, this is fine. Now, there's something to take into consideration here with these numbers, and that is, nitrogen and potassium and calcium. You can see they're all relatively close to one another, and that's a ratio of 1 to 1 to 1. And typically, that likes to you like to keep that in there. There's a chart called Mulder's chart, and it talks about how certain elements can interfere with the uptake of other elements. And so, if you have too much potassium and not enough calcium, there can be an issue. And if you have too much calcium and not enough nitrogen, it can be an issue. So it's important to keep in mind some of these ratios. And the same with magnesium to calcium. They usually like a 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 for magnesium to calcium. So if you had hypothetically 300 parts per million of calcium, you'd want to have at least 100 to 200 parts per million of magnesium. So these are some things to keep in mind. The other things to keep in mind that we're not talking about here is if you're using pH up, which is usually a potassium carbonate, with general hydroponics or many other, it will increase this potassium number. And so you really should put that in there if you require potassium or if you require pH up, so that you can see how that's affecting your potassium numbers. If you use pH down, which is phosphoric acid, a lot of times, it will affect your phosphoric numbers. And so, again, you can add phosphoric in there if you know how much you typically need in order to balance your nutrient solutions. Okay, so we've got our set of targets here. You'll start to look for recipes. Watch the video from the Israeli scientist Ms. Bernstein. It's very educational. It'll help you understand the numbers you choose. And the good news is that there is a wide range of successful parts per million that you can guarantee good growth and good success with, and also that each cultivar will react differently. Some cultivars can handle high nitrogen and others can't, or potassium, or phosphorus, or calcium. So it's very, very important that you watch and kind of see the ranges. But typically with nitrogen, anywhere between 120 to 250 ppm has good success. With phosphorus, 30 to 100 has good success. Potassium is usually anywhere from 100 to up to even 250, 300 parts per million in flour. Magnesium is between 30 and 100 ppm, and calcium can be anywhere from 100 to probably 300 ppm. So those are kind of rough guidelines that you want to stick within. And this is for a seedling, so it's pretty dilute. And let's just say we're mixing up, I think a lot of people mix in gallons. So let's just say we're mixing up 1 gallon of our hydroponic solution to feed our plants. Okay, so we have our target numbers. This says if we like these numbers and we wanted to save them to the database, then we could label this and say this is a Hydrobuddy Hydrobuddy, let's say tutorial. Okay, and we'll just say add formula to database. So that way we save all these numbers for future use. And it'll say a formulation named add Hydrobuddy was saved to the database. So now something like this, and we said, oh God, where was the numbers that I had? We could go back and we could say a Hydrobuddy tutorial, and all of a sudden these numbers would pop up, and we would be back to doing it. So, sorry, I just clicked off there for a moment. I'll just open back up Hydrobuddy. We're all ready here now. We have put in our input numbers. We have saved our formula and labeled it to the database for future use. We made sure that we are mixing the proper amount of liquid that we're hoping to mix. And we have selected the ingredients that we want Hydrobuddy to use in order to get this. So we're ready to carry out our calculation. So we put in carry out our calculation. It says, well, there's some errors for the ammonomical nitrogen. It's too high, and maybe it's not within our solution. So no big deal if you get a little error regardless of the element. Just click OK. It says here iron's a little too high. That's OK too. And then it says here calculation has been carried out successfully. You say fantastic. Now what do I do now? And what we do is we go to the results page. And the results page is telling you that these were, let's go back and look at our targets again. Our targets were 125, 30, 132, 60, and 36. And the results page is Hydrobuddy telling us, okay, this is what I think you should feed in terms of milliliters for 1 gallon of water. And if you do, these are the numbers that you will achieve. And you can see it's not perfect. We were looking for 125, it gave us 118. We were looking for 30 in phosphorus, it gave us 35. And so it's just trying to get us as close as it can with all of the ratios within these ingredients on the left to try and get close. And it's saying, well, feed it this amount of milliliters. So it's saying Kali Magic, give it 4.392 milliliters. And Flora Bloom, give it 4.916 milliliters. And put that all in 1 gallon, and this is what you'll have in terms of parts per million. And so this is all great stuff, except for who knows how to measure these kind of decimal places in milliliters. So what I like to do is I kind of round up or I round down. So in Kali Magic, it says we want 4.39. I'll just click it and I'll put 4. And then we'll look at the calcium number down here. It's 136. We go back to our main. We were looking for 136. So hey, I'm happy with that. And then the Flora Bloom, we're looking at 4.96. Well, that's awfully close to 5. So that's going to adjust all the micronutrients and maybe even a little bit of our nitrogen. And then the Flora Grow, it's pretty darn close to 6 milli. So we'll do that. And we'll do, let's say, 7 mils of the micro and see what happens. Okay, so I've made these all whole numbers here in terms of milliliters. And for me, what I do is I just get a small syringe and I'd pour these products into a cup. And then I would just draw out 4 mils and I'd throw it into 1 gallon, mix it up, and eventually move into the next. Now, I have a video on mixing nutrients inside of a series that I'm doing about a grand exchange breeding project. And the first video in there within the first couple days is about mixing veg nutrients, and it goes over how I typically mix these into solution. So we've got it all now, and it's saying, okay, what are our numbers? 125, that looks a lot better to our target. 35 is pretty darn close. This was 138, and our target was 132, so hey, I'm happy with that. And we have magnesium 43 and calcium 145. So we're a little high in the calcium to target, and we're a little low in the magnesium. And so if you were really concerned about this and saying, hey, how do I get that magnesium up, or how do I get that calcium up? Well, it comes down to what ingredients you've added in here. So if I wanted to get magnesium up, I could go and get magnesium sulfate or Epsom salts, and I could add that to the list, and it would dial in this number really good. And just to show you, let's just do that. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to find, here's Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate. I'm going to add it to the used file over here. And I'm going to go back to the main page. Let's just see what our numbers were again. It was 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, that's pretty darn easy to remember. Okay, so we're going to go here, and we're going to go carry out calculation. It's going to give us our warnings about the nitrogen and the other items, and it's going to say successful. And here we go. So
we're going to go back to our 4, 5, 6, 7 because we liked that. And you can see here it's telling us if we were to add 0.894, or let's just say 0.9 grams of magnesium sulfate, look what it does to our magnesium number. It takes it to 66 parts per million. And you can see that we were looking for 60. So this is how you can adjust individual elements. Is you can up items, you can up the dosage of things with higher nitrogen over here if you want higher nitrogen, or higher potassium or phosphorus. Whatever you're looking to do, you can increase the dosage and dial in these numbers, which is pretty darn cool. And so 0.9 grams, if I was in real life, and I do use magnesium sulfate often, I would just use a little scale. I would actually measure out 0.9 grams of salts, and then I would throw that into the 1 gallon along with the rest. And hey, look what we've done. We've achieved some great numbers that were our targets. And so this is really interesting because if we were to use, I'm going to open up the General Hydroponics feed chart, and we're going to look at it. And so we can see here, what does General Hydroponics recommend for a seedling in week 1? And it's telling us that we would want to do 2.5 milliliters of the micro, and we want to do 2.5 milliliters of the grow, and we want to do 2.5 milliliters of the blue. So, we can reverse engineer what a feed schedule looks like, and we can actually see what they're telling us to feed in parts per million. So let's do that just for the fun of it. Okay, so we're not going to add any Cali Magic because it's not telling us to do that. And we're just going to follow what the feed chart says at 2.5 milliliters. And we'll go down to 2.5 milliliters. And we're going to 2.5 milliliters. And we're going to take Epsom salts out. And now we can see that if we follow the feed chart, and it's saying what the EC would probably be, and the ppm if you were using the 500 scale. And it's saying here, total nitrogen in ppm. Isn't this interesting? They're giving us some ppm. It says 60. And when we actually look at this, it's saying that ppms here are around 45. So it's a little bit different than, let me just make sure I got it right, 2.5 micro, 2.5 grow, and 2.5 flora. 2.5 micro, 2.5 grow, 2.5 flora. Okay, so yeah, we've got it right. So these are what we're calculating for ppm. And it's saying here that this is relatively low, in my opinion. And these are numbers that are a little bit too weak for seedlings for me. I would prefer to run it a little higher. Let's see what week 2 looks like. So 5.2 micro, 4.8 grow, 3.7 bloom. So it was 3.7 bloom, and it was 4.8 grow. This is milliliters. And these feed charts, they're really interesting. Like how are we going to measure 5.2 and 4.8? I mean, that's pretty darn tough, right? So, and lastly is 5.2 micro. 5.2 micro. And we'll see it's giving us a little bit better numbers here in terms of nitrogen, potassium, magnesium, but still pretty weak. And this is for 1 gallon. So as you can see, as it starts to ramp up, you'll probably see these numbers get a little bit bigger. And if you were just following this feed chart from General Hydroponics 3-part program, then obviously, you don't really know what the parts per million are. You're just feeding these random milliliters and hoping that everything works out. And, you might have to adjust a grow for maybe a calcium deficiency, or perhaps a magnesium deficiency, or something along those lines. And you say to yourself, well, what do I do? I'll just give it a little splash more of Flora Bloom or Flora Grow. And that's the whole point of Hydrobuddy. Hydrobuddy allows you to come in here and say, hey, listen, I need to add some more calcium. Let's look at my calcium number. Which one of these products can I use to add some calcium and make adjustments? And that's the whole point of being able to make adjustments with Hydrobuddy. Okay, so that's it for the basic tutorial for Hydrobuddy. Again, this is the main page. I'm going to go back. You open the program up. You start on this landing page. You move to the main page, and you input your favorite numbers. And again, watch the video. It'll give you an idea of where you want to be. And then once you've entered your numbers, you can label them if you want to save them, and then add it to the database. And you can recall it later through this drop-down menu. Always make sure that you have the right amount here in liters or gallons for the amount of liquid you want. or the results page will give you the wrong milliliters to add. So I've done it before. It's very easy oversight. Make sure you have, if you're mixing up 1 gallon, make sure you've selected 1 gallon. If you want to add your water quality, you can do it here. Once you carry out your calculation, you're going to go to the results page. Often it'll give you some weird numbers like this. And so it's probably best to just, round them up to whole numbers. That's what I like to do. And then look at your ppm and decide whether or not that's where you want to be. So again, I liked the numbers 4, 5, 6, 7, and what was it, 0.9 in mag. And that gave me some numbers that I really liked here to start with seedlings. It's a little bit stronger. And because I run high intensity LED lights, and I have a video about lights, I start them very high, my seedlings at somewhere between 550 and 750 ppfd and 45 to 60 DLI. And so if I'm going to give a plant that much light, I better give it the nutrition to go along with it. If we, as the metaphor goes, if light is exercise and nutrients are nutrition, if we have our lights down low and we overfeed the plant, it's the same as us being a couch potato sitting on the couch and eating a bunch of food and doing no exercise, and that's not going to make us healthy. And the flip side of that, if we crank the lights up very high and we don't give it enough food, it's the same as asking us to run a marathon with no carbohydrates, and we're probably going to faint and fall over. So it's really important that we match our nutrition with the light output. But if we're starting a little bit higher like we are here, and we crank the lights up, then there's no reason why we can't build an Olympic athlete who can handle all the exercise that's required with the proper nutrition. So hopefully you found this tutorial great and that it's useful to some degree. Again, we've used labels that are off of the internet. I don't recommend that. Use the labels that are in front of you on the back of your bottles when inputting it into Hydrobuddy. And add your products. Make sure you have them selected in this window for use. And I hope you have a lot of fun. Play with your recipes. Really dial in your nutrition. And the wonderful part about this is that once you have a set of numbers that you're comfortable with, that you like and you use, you can literally swap them out for any type of nutrition and any type of supplements that are in your local hydroponic store. So go and try different brands. Sometimes some of these brands like Athena or perhaps Advanced Nutrients, they have 20 bottles to achieve these kind of numbers that can be achieved with 3 or 4 bottles of a lesser value. And so you can save yourself the headache of buying 20 bottles and buy yourself a good A and B, perhaps a magnesium sulfate, a calcium, a CalMag product, and a potassium sulfate, and you can pretty much hit these numbers for pennies on the dollar compared to the expensive nutrient plans, like general hydroponics here. I know they have a 10-part series as well. So plug in different products and see which ones you like and which ones hit the numbers, and you're on your way to making your own custom nutrition for your hydroponic grows, and hopefully save yourself a lot of money and creating a feed schedule that I think is far superior sometimes to the ones that are provided by the nutrition companies. So I hope you've had a lot of fun. Download Hydrobuddy, play around with it, and there'll be some more videos to come in the Hydrobuddy section. And I'll link, of course, a few videos that will help talk about ppms and, get educated and have fun. Thanks.
Okay, this is just a little video at the end of the Hydrobuddy tutorial that I thought I would share with everybody that just watched the video about ppms and using Hydrobuddy and selecting ppms. This is some commercial fertilizers and their ppms when they're reverse engineered by their feed charts. And so I thought that this would be quite interesting for you folks to see. You can see we've got Jack's Veg on the far left, Athena in the middle, and Crop Salt on the right. And so you can see the nitrogen for Jack's Veg is 151. It tapers down in bloom to about 120. Athena is 137, tapers down to 110, and Crop Salt's 140 and tapers to 119. So you can kind of see that these numbers aren't far off amongst the commercial manufacturers in terms of their ppms. And you can look through this chart. I'm going to leave it up on the screen, but it works through its phosphorus numbers, its potassium numbers, magnesium numbers, calcium, sulfur, and micros.
So one thing you'll notice is that during vegetation, nitrogen is higher in most of these companies, and in flower, you'll notice that potassium takes a spike and nitrogen takes a dip. So you can see that some of them go pretty high, like Athena. Their bloom formula, their potassium goes up to 263 parts per million, and I've noticed for myself that I really like to be between 200 and 265 depending on the cultivar, and it really helps bulk up the buds really well. And by lowering the nitrogen, you stop the leafy growth, and buds tend to be easier to trim with less leaf on the buds, and the buds swell up nice and fat. So these are some things to consider. Okay, I think we're done here. You could pause the video if you need to look at this further, and we're going to cut to the next video, which is Nitrate Bernstein. She's a cannabis scientist in Israel, and she's going to show you some images of ppms for each one of these elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and what it looks like in the plants in their studies that they did in a controlled environment. So you'll see the plant shapes and the bud sizes, and how each ppm affected the plants in their study. So you can kind of use that also as a guide to start selecting your own baseline numbers. And then it's a matter of trial and error. It's about trying this in your environment with the cultivars you have and seeing what it is that you need to adjust to get the best possible yield and growth and nutrition and health for your plant. So I hope this is helpful. I hope the last video with Hydrobuddy was helpful, and the next one is certainly going to be interesting. It's a little dry, it's a little sciencey, but it's definitely useful information that'll help you dial in your own feed schedule. So without further ado,
and I will want to show you some of our results. It's right now there's a lot of data. Please focus on the image only. And this experiment was a response to nitrogen supply. This was done by Avias Lohner, a PhD student in the lab, master student at the time, is almost finishing his PhD studies now. And we really had no idea where to start with because there was zero information. So we started with a very large range of nitrogens, starting from 30 all the way to 320 milligram per liter ppm. And we can see, so these are the five concentrations that we started. As we can see, under 30 ppm, as expected, this is a very, very low. The plants were small and efficient, slightly better under 80 ppms. 160 looked okay, so did 240. 320 already suffered from probably toxicity. So we have a classical response curve to nutrients going from deficiency to optimal range of supply to over threshold of optimum, which is toward toxicity. And if we look at the development, and if we look at the numerical value of this, so we look at the plant height and biomass production and so forth, it follows the same thing. So this is leaf fresh biomass, and we can see here the concentration of nitrogen. We can see an increase until an optimum and then a decrease. Same thing occurs with stem, with fresh weight of the stem, and same thing with fresh weight rate of the root. So it's a classical response, and we could identify that 160 ppm nitrogen is an optimal range. What happened in terms of concentration? You can, in terms of concentration in the plant, physiological responses, respiration, we did dozens of measurements. You can, I'm not going obviously to show them. You can log into the application if you want and see the plant response, the physiological responses. But overall, we can see that nitrogen accumulation as nitrate in the plant increased with the increase of end supply. So it's a classical plant response to nutrients. What happened in the reproductive stage of growth? So now we are talking about the flowering stage. The same 5 concentration of nitrogen. We can also see deficiency in 30 and 80 ppms. We can also see beginning of symptoms of unoptimal conditions under 320. And again, the optimum concentration probably is 160, although 240 will probably won't harm it, but it's not needed. So for the sake of economical condition for the farmers, environmental contamination, whether it's better to stick with 100 and 160, and we checked it for several varieties. But you know what? This is just biomass production. What happened when we actually went and analyze concentration of the therapeutic the compounds, biologically active secondary metabolites such as terpenes and such as cannabinoids. Actually, the best production was actually, the highest production was actually in those sorry-looking, hungry, nitrogen-starving plants. That's where we received the highest concentration of the highest concentration of those compounds. So here are some examples. You can see many more of them in our publications. But for example, if we look at cannabinoids and we look again at the concentration of the minerals, so THC, CBGA, CBD, CBC, all of them were highest under the deficiency conditions, and they're decreased with increased concentration. Same thing for most of the terpenes. Most of the terpenes were highest under the low concentration of nitrogen and decreased. Some of them were not affected, but for many of them, and you can again look at the publication, highest concentration were in the hungry plant. So now we're in trouble. Are we going to grow those tiny, hungry-looking plants? Definitely not. We need to find ways, and that's what we're working on, to trick the plants to think that they're under stress of some kind in order to produce. And this is some of the work that we're working on in the lab today. So that was nitrogen. Nitrogen deficiency, best for optimal production. What about potassium? This is again was done by Avia Saloner. So we checked it again. We had no idea where to start. So we had, based on knowledge for agronomical knowledge for a wide range of plants, we checked a concentration from 50 ppm, which obviously we were hoping to shoot from deficiency to toxicity. So we tried concentration from 15 to 240 ppm potassium, and again we can see that the 15 and the 60 plants were, definitely 15 was deficient, 60 were slightly longer, and then between 100 and 175, that was an optimum range, probably saying that 100 is sufficient, and there's no need to increase much much more than this. So this is for the vegetative phase. What happened at the reproductive phase of growth? So this is again the same 5 different concentration of potassium. By the way, I have to make sure that I explained that the irrigation here was done, of course, by fertigation. So that means that the fertilizer were mixed, dissolved in the irrigation water, and supplied to the plant as mixed. And also important to note is that most nutrient studies, mineral nutrition studies, which are aimed into seeing how much the plant takes up, we use perlite as the growing substance because it's a relatively inert medium. So whatever we give in the irrigation, that's what the plant sees during the time of irrigation and later on. So there's very little chemical interaction with the soilless media. And also we adjust the volume of irrigation in every irrigation event to make sure that we have at least 30%, between 30 and 35% of leachate. So flow down the pot. By this, we ensure that we don't have high accumulation of nutrient in the medium. So we leach the medium, and so that means that it keeps the concentration that the root sees rather constant. So going back to potassium, so we're looking at potassium in the reproductive phase of growth, again from 15 to 240 milligram per liter, ppm, and based on visual appearance and based on a lot of biomass measurement and physiological measurements, 100 ppm is the optimal range, and it's quite sufficient. However, what happened again when we measured secondary metabolites, cannabinoids and terpenoids, the same thing happens. That the highest concentration was actually in the potassium-starving plants. So both for potassium and for nitrogen, the best production of secondary metabolite was actually in those small-looking hungry plants. So now the grower had to decide: is he shooting for higher concentration, or is he shooting for more biomass? And of course, for those growers which don't sell flowers, but they actually do extract, and they're interested in biomass per plant or biomass per meter square, we have all this data in the manuscript, and still the same thing occur, obviously, that I mean, there were higher concentration, lower and lower this, and for the totals, it's possible to look at the manuscript. Just to show the results again for the secondary metabolite production. So if we look at on the x-axis on the concentration and the different cannabinoids, so we see again, this is what I was telling you before, the higher concentration of THC and CBD and CBDVA, most of the cannabinoids that we tested were highest under the nutrient deficient plant, and it decreased with time. And these are data for some of the terpenes that we measured, and we can see, again, these are for two varieties, by the way. So we can see, again, the reduction, highest concentration for most of them was under deficiency conditions, but not for all of them. For some cases, some terpenes actually increased with increase in concentration. That means that it's not a general phenomena. It's actually effect on specific biosynthetic pathways. So depending if someone is interested in a specific terpenes or specific cannabinoid or specific flavonoid, the specific effect of whatever mineral, nutrient, or environmental condition in general will have to be studied. Just to show you that the responses are of the plant responses follow what we see in the visually and follow the results of the biomass. So for example, here if we look, we checked many physiological parameters. I only show a few of them here. So let's say, for example, if we look at photosynthesis or transpiration or somatoconductance, and these are in two varieties of two cultivars of cannabis. So we see again deficiency plant, the plant function is lower. Then we have an optimal range of plant function, and again, probably a toxicity range. And we say to be on the safe side, probably 100 ppm potassium is sufficient for cultivation and the reproductive phase. And these are the biomass data for the same experiment that shows that under low concentration, of course, biomass will be lower than under higher concentration, and this is the results for the inflorescence for the dry weight. So this is the yield, So we have a contradiction between the biomass, which increases with increased potassium and with increased nitrogen, and of course the concentration of cannabinoids and terpenoids decreases. Phosphorus, right? The big three in mineral nutrition is N, P, and K, right? So we looked at nitrogen, we looked at potassium. Of course, we're now going to look at phosphorus. This was a study that was done by Sivan Ciccone, a master's student at the lab at the time. And she was looking at phosphorus in the vegetative growth phase and in the reproductive growth phase. So let's look at the vegetative first, and we show here the results for two different varieties. And again, we started because we had no idea where to start because there were no information. By the way, when I say no idea, it's not because, I mean, there's no science-based information. If we were to look at on the website, what we like to say, Dr. Google, we find thousands of blogs, and many of them was saying, and still say up to today, cannabis is hungry for phosphorus at the vegetative growth, at the flowering stage. You need to put a short day phase. You need to put a lot of phosphorus. And at the time, some blogs were saying as much as 600 ppm or 1,000 ppm. Now, for whoever grows and has an experience with agriculture, you know that normally the maximum that we do in soilless culture in pots is 30. So I thought I was actually pretty brave by going out all the way to 90, because most of our regular crops will die under these conditions. But we said, who knows? Maybe cannabis is really, really unique, but going above this, there was no need, and we didn't dare do it. So that we did a classical experiment from 5 ppm until 90 ppm, and I was wondering whether we will get toxicity in spite of what we see by so many cultivators and growers that now we know that even use higher concentration. So let's see if it's needed, at least for our type of studies. What we find out that 5 and 15 was not sufficient amount of phosphorus, but 30, you don't need to go above 30 for the vegetative growth phase. 30 give up a wonderful plant function, optimal cultivation. Something that we did find is that there is a very large range of optimum range. So really from 15 to 90, there were no toxicity symptoms, even above 90. Biomass at 15 was pretty on the good side. In order to be on the safe side, we recommend to use 30 ppm, but definitely there's no need to go above it. And this is a graph basis of the results for biomass for the plants that we've just seen in the previous slides. So we see the concentration of phosphorus, and we look at the dry weight here for two varieties, and we can see the increase from all the way up to 15 and from 30 all the way up to 90, no change, no statistical significant change in any of those two varieties. And when we look at the function of these plants, so if we look, for example, at photosynthesis and transpiration and stomatoconductance, we see the same thing, that, maximum increase all the way up to 30, and then in some cases even decrease. So optimal function after 30, and really for not because of yield biomass and not because of plant function, we find in the varieties that we work with, we found no reason to go above 30. Interesting thing, of course, is what happened at the reproductive growth phase. So what happens at the reproductive growth phase? Again, several varieties. We did experiment with those two varieties, and with two varieties, and we can see that the same concentration that low concentration gave the plants were deficient, but all the way up to 19 in terms of plant development and biomass production and yield production, there was no need to go above 30. The optimum again was all the way up to 90, so we didn't see any toxicity symptoms or oversupply under 90, but really there was no reason to go above 30. And what happened when we evaluated secondary metabolite production? The same thing that we saw for nitrogen and for potassium, also for P, also for phosphorus. The highest concentration was in those in those hungry plants, in the deficient plants, in the deficient plants. So when we look at the data, the biomass, so again, what the plants that we've seen a minute ago, we see again an increase in dry weight all the way up to 30. Above 30, the increase is not significant anymore. This is, by the way, is total plant biomass. This is inflorescent biomass. Each one of those organ biomass can be is presented separately, and this is the same thing for different varieties. So we're seeing very similar responses for both varieties. What happened about the secondary metabolites? So we presented some of them. There are more in the publication if you're interested to look in. And let's look, for example, at the CBDA for two varieties, THCA, DVA, THCA. For most of them, highest concentration, as I said before, were in the deficiency conditions, and it reduced with the increase in production. So as a grower, really it's difficult. Definitely, we're not going to grow those hungry plants, because they are small and they produce small amount of biomass. We have to choose somewhere, but increasing above the optimal is definitely not recommended, because you are risking reducing the secondary metabolites even further. In terms of plant function, so if we look at photosynthesis and transpiration and stomatoconductance with the different concentrations, so we can see, again, classical, that in under 30 ppm, it reached the maximum function of statistically significant in all of those plants. So there's no need to go way above 30, at least in the varieties that we've checked. Okay, so now we thought we know it all. We checked N, P, and K, phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium. For all of them, biomass was increased until a central level, and secondary metabolite was highest under deficiency conditions. Dalit Morad, the master student in the lab, actually, we were just tested last week and finished a master project very successfully, I should say. And this is a paper that's in press. It's just going to come up probably in a week or two, be published online. And she worked on magnesium in the vegetative and on the reproductive growth phases. And what we found here, again, we tried from a very low concentration all the way to 140, which is quite high concentration. And we found out that 2 ppms and 20 ppms were below optimal range. But from 35 until 140, this was still an optimum range. So it's not a toxicity. We didn't identify toxicity level, but 35 is sufficient, to receive optimal growth and plant development in the vegetative stage. You can see this here tabulated for the biomass production. So this will be the total of the plant, and here we look at the leaves, and we can see that above 30 we don't get increase in plant growth. What happened in the reproductive stage, in the flowering stage? The same 5 concentration of magnesium was checked, and we clearly see deficiency symptoms under the low concentration, and then we see an optimum concentration all the way up to 40 in terms of, but this is for yield quantity, right? Also, by the way, I want to say the reason why those branches are falling down, because in order to take a nice photograph of them and put them behind the black screen, we have to remove them from the supporting wires. So the moment we did, and then after photography, they're being put in. So that's not the normal way that they grow, it's just to show the plant. So it's what we found, okay, so for here we say the range is somewhere between 20 to 140 in terms of biomass yield, in terms of yield production, in terms of quantity. What happened in terms of quality? So we were kind of sure NPK gave us deficiency, the best concentration. Let's see what happened here. So you know what? This is now what happened for magnesium. Magnesium is very different. If we look at the concentration of magnesium, increasing concentration of magnesium on the x-axis, and we look here, I put an example of some cannabinoids. Under magnesium deficiency, we receive the very low concentration of cannabinoids, and they actually increase, and we receive an optimum concentration under 35 ppm, and only above 35 ppm for most cannabinoids, we received no statistical difference. For some of them, there was a slight difference. So again, from the varieties of Bichuk that we evaluated, there's no reason to go above 35, but you need 35 in order to make sure that you don't hurt your production. By the way, it's the physiology of why each one of those which minerals are affecting differently is fascinating. In terms of magnesium, for example, is critical for ATP function and for a function of more than 300 enzymes in the plant. And it's important for sugar loading into the phloem and therefore translocation of sugars and carbohydrates to the flour. And it's critical for many, many other processes. It's a part of the chlorophyll molecule, and it's important for activity of rubisco, for photosynthesis. So the responses are not just responses for stress. It's not like we have nitrogen deficiency of whatever deficiency, that's why the plant increased. And because the responses for each one of those nutrients can be broken down to physiological factors that the plants are involved with, that the minerals are involved with. Okay. In terms of nutrient, that's probably almost the last group that I want to very quickly show. And this is the work that was done again by Aviad during his PhD studies. For nitrogen, there are 2 major forms of nitrogen that the plant can take up, and they're very different. One of them is ammonium, which is NO3-, so it's an anion. The other one is nitrate, which is NO3-, and then ammonium, which is NO4+, so it's an anion and a cation, and it affects very much physiology of the plant, or even up to the level of pH of the cytoplasm and many other compounds, many other processes in the plants. So it's always a question, okay, we know how much nitrogen to give, what ratio of ammonium to nitrate should we give? So we tested this, and it tested as an experiment. We gave either 100%, so this is the percentage of ammonium among all the nitrogen that was given. So we either gave it as 100% nitrate, or 100% ammonia, or ratios of NIM. So this is, in terms of percentage of ammonium, it's 0, 10, 30, 50, and 100% from all the nitrogen that we gave the plants. And this again is also of course published. And what we can see, even just by looking at the plant, 100 ppm ammonium, the plant did not survive, so all the plants died. 0% ammonia, meaning 100% nitrate, the plants were really happy. And we are looking at the biomass. It's easy to see this on the biomass. We see that the highest plant, the best morphology, the highest plant growth and development actually occurred under 0% ammonia, 100% nitrogen nutrition, which is what cannabis prefers. How does it affect cannabinoids? So the same thing. We saw the highest production of cannabinoids under 0%, of some cannabinoids under 0% ammonia, so 100% nitrate. For some of them, for some of the cannabinoids, the differences were not statistical. So probably we are safe to go all the way up to 30% ammonium if needed, but probably 0% ammonium is better for cannabis. The last slide that I want to show today for the nutrients is deals with the way that we calculate, the way that we need to calculate how much mineral to give the plant in every stage of growth. The studies that I showed now, or we have to start with somewhere. So we have to find out what's the response of the plant to different levels of those minerals. And by the way, we have conducted experiments in the lab in other nutrients as well, on zinc and manganese and many others that we are in the process of summing them up for publication. But this was steady concentration throughout the cultivation, throughout the vegetative, or throughout the reproductive phase, other than doing flushing in the end, which means reducing level of concentration at the last week and a half of growth. But still, there's another level, many levels of layering that need to be investigated in order to understand plant response. For example, that should we give different concentration every week? This depends on how much of the plants actually take up every week. At the beginning, the plants are smaller. Definitely, they take up less than when they're larger, and also the phenological differences that in different stages of development, the plant might need more or less. So how do we deal with this? In agriculture, we usually try to develop what's called the position rate curves. What is the position rate? Is how much nitrogen is being deposited into the plant in the first week of cultivation, second week of cultivation, third week of cultivation, and so on. How much copper, how much molybdenum, how much iron, how much phosphorus, and so on. So we're working on this, and this is this is publication that will come out very soon. And we're looking in this rate, it's time after planting. So unlike the previous curve, we're looking at age of the plant. The first group of curves is for the vegetative stage of growth, and this is for the flowering stage of growth. So we cut the plants many, many times destructively and analyze how much minerals in the leaves and the shoots and roots, so we can know how much the plant takes up every week. And what we can see, so this is just gram per plant. So we can see that, of course, as the plant grows, there's an increase in amount of nutrients. Now, if we take the difference integral between one point and the other, this will give us the deposition rate curve, which means how much goes into the plant in the first week and the second week and the third week and so on. It's too complicated and there's no time to clearly show it here, but just what I want to show you that there are differences between nutrients. For example, if we look at nitrogen all the way up to the end of cultivation, the plant keep on taking nitrogen and phosphorus and iron and potassium. But if we look at calcium, no, they stop taking calcium much more early. So for example, and this was done, by the way, for between 3 and 5 cultivars. So we know tells us, for example, that probably during this stage of growth, there's no more need to fertilize with calcium. And it also tells us how much to give at every stages of growth. So this is the next level I think that we need to deal with. What else do we do in the lab? And I'm not going to show this. Obviously, we're dealing with nutrition. I just thought that you may want to be interested to look at some of our publication. We're dealing with light quality, so spectrum effect on plant growth, light intensity, temperature effect, studies about flowering control, a lot of work about post-harvest chemical changes to see what happened post-harvest and how can we affect post-harvest by cultivation, because sometimes cultivation affect nutrition as well, affect post-harvest. effect of botanical and conventional pest management treatments, because we have to deal with contamination and many other issues. Let's take a look. Okay. Okay, we also do a lot of work on plant architecture. So and this is for standardization. If we look at a plant, we analyze concentration at primary and secondary inflorescence. So these are the colas, so to speak, with more inner inflorescence, which have more shading, and we analyze the difference between microclimates in the plant and stabilization and concentration. We did this on more than 4 varieties. It's published in 2 or 3 publications. This is control plants that we only did defoliation, only removing the leaf, removing leaves and branches from the bottom of the plant, only removing secondary branches and so on, 1 trim or 2 trim, pinching and 2 pinching to the plant. And of course, all of this in order to see the effect on standardization and on the yield quantity. We also checked, and this was done by Nadav Danziger, who was a master student in the lab at the time. And also the same type of plant pruning, how are they affected by plant density? Because plant density is very important, whether you plant 1 plant per meter, 2 plants per meter, 10 plants per meter. Of course, it's a matter of the interaction between plant architecture and plant density. To summarize, I want to say that, first of all, we found out and we know that mineral nutrition, and I showed today NPK and magnesium, has a considerable impact on secondary metabolism in cannabis. So there's a power and there's a potential for those in order to control secondary metabolism. We have to be careful with this. Second thing is that yield quantity and chemical quality are very often affected differently by mineral nutrition. And therefore, there is an urgent need for science-based plant science information to support the developing cannabis industry. And plant science is important, as a basic for everything, for nutrition, for any agronomical process. And so there are many challenges, and there are also breakthroughs. Definitely we need further development of agrotechnologies for improvement of cultivation, both for quantity and for quality. Development of advanced technologies for directing the chemical quality, so not only the quantity. And controlling the chemical quality is a major issue for specific chemical indications. So once we will know what secondary metabolites are required for whatever indication, it's not only a need to identify which strain, which cultivar works on whatever medical indication, it's also will be a need how to make sure that it produces the same profile consistently within and between batches of growth. And I want to thank my amazing lab group, which is keep changing throughout the years. Many of them don't want to leave and we're doing masters and PhD and whatever. It's a very, very difficult studying medical cannabis.